Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. So, today we're doing the talk about happiness and the happiness from within us, like how we're supposed to achieve that happiness. Many people are under the misconception that happiness is this power that's supposed to come from other people to you. It's not that I need to be happy with myself, it's about what are the circumstances around me doing for me so that I will be happy, which is a very, very passive life if you think about it. If you always go through life thinking it's the responsibility of this and that to make me happy, you always put yourself on the role of a passenger, meaning I'm sitting on this side and this person is in charge of making me happy. This could be a very damaging thinking when it comes to children, when it comes to spouses, when it comes to relationship or even friendship. A true sense of healthy happiness is when parents are able to raise their kids in a confident, loving format that they know that they within themselves hold the collectiveness of what they feel that's within them. So when kids come and say, "Oh, he made me do this," or like they hit each other, or they say, "He made me angry," or "He made me this," I always tell people it's really important from the young age to start explaining to children that what your body does, what you feel on the inside, and what you choose to do with it, you're in charge of it. You're responsible for it. Doesn't matter who did what. Ultimately, what you do, you are held accountable for. Even in the world of like the outside world, like when you see two people are about to get into a fight, right, and they're chest pressing against each other, whoever committed the assault is who? The one that took their hand and hit the other person, right? That person can come and say he was pressing against me, right? But ultimately, who's going to get charged for it? The one that took their hand and hit the other person. So this also is the same way with the concept of happiness. Happiness in the Western world right now holds a very heavy weight on it because so many people are willing to do anything to gain this experience of happiness. So if we were to dissect what happiness is, I'm always like fascinated of why do I feel what I feel and you feel what you feel, and we could be in the same situation and not react to it and feel different feelings, right? So there's a few factors. One is your upbringing, one is your genetic, and one is also like, just what you were exposed to, what the modeling was around you. And the genetic part is the amount of chemicals that you release. Dopamine and serotonin are classically known as your happy chemicals. There are the good chemical, happy chemicals that are always there to give you the rush, right? But what happens with kids that, or people or adults that don't have enough of it? What happens? They don't feel as happy and positive as other people, and they have to make an effort to work on it. Unfortunately, when sometimes it's really, really out of balance, they have to get further treatment for it. And actually, the fortunate part is that we do live in a generation that there are medication for it. I remember when I was working at JFS, I had this client who was depressed for a very long time, and finally, she agreed to try to go on some antidepressant because we realized cognitive behavioral therapy, narrative therapy, none of that was working for her. In this particular case, when she finally went on the medication, within a week or two after it, she said, "I feel like flowers have colors. I feel like I hear the birds. I feel like I can feel the sun." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Before I took the medication, every time I would come outside in my balcony, I didn't feel it." So by her, you know that there was a chemical imbalance. She did not have enough of the chemicals to feel that. But what happens with some other people is role modeling of their family. So if you're brought up with a very pessimistic, especially like most of the time, the main caregiver is the mother. So if you have a very, very pessimistic mother, or like Debbie Downer, as the Americans call it, that constantly is like kind of like swimming in the pool of disaster and misery, subconsciously you take that upon yourself unless you make new neural pathways. What happens is with phobia, with experiences and happiness, based on our upbringing, we decide to go this way or that way. So let's say if you want to take a new project and you had this kind of parent that would say, "I know you're going to fail. I know you're not going to do a good job. You never do a good job. It's going to be a disaster. You're never going to get a good grade." So before you even start the project, what are you doing? you start ruminating and going downwards, and you don't even know you're doing this because it's already a habit. So one of the first factors is slowing down, pausing and telling yourself, why did I just think that? Why did I just say that? Why did I just experience that? Like, what happened? Instead of it being like a immediate reaction and just kind of like acting on what you feel, it's about slowing yourself down. The slowing down is what's going to help your brain to decide instead of just react and do it out of habit. So, in order for us to be able to do that, we need to slow down. So, one of the things is that with dopamine gets released by rewards. So the more like I say in the mammals in the animal kingdom, like for instance, a monkey releases dopamine when he sees a banana, right? Then he sees a banana that he can reach. So as he's thinking about that, the dopamine starts like coming out. Once he holds the banana, takes it down and eats it, is the highest level of the dopamine, and then it goes down, right? Why? Because he got his reward. His reward was the aim to get that banana. What happens is when people are under the misconception that this hope, this dopamine release or this happy release should be all the time, this is not part of the natural life. Life comes with different feelings, different sensations. That's what life is about. The earlier you expose your children to be able to tolerate different things, the healthier adults they will be. That's when they're able to modulate between different emotions. You know, why is weed or marijuana so popular now? Because it makes you release all of that and makes you feel so high and happy. But that happiness is affecting your brain to release such abundance of that. But in the long run, it also is destroying the neurotransmitters in your brain that are the good ones, which is going to affect early onset of, again, with some people with Alzheimer, dementia. Obviously, if it's prescribed, it's a whole different world. But I'm saying if people are taking it just to feel happy all the time, it's not going to be to your benefit, because being happy all the time is not the goal of life. The goal of life is, how do I modulate and work through all these feelings and emotions that I have and be able to cross it over. Do you want to see if your drink got ready?
Oh, I have to go get it.
I think so. Okay, I'll pause it till you come. So, when it comes to us creating this illusionary world for our children, which involves happiness all the time or fairness all the time, we're leading them up for failure because they grow up thinking the world does them wrong. Many addictions, many maladaptive behaviors starts from that experience of shame or not knowing what to do with it. And if you look at it, behind shame or that unfulfilled feeling is this desire of being happy all the time. So unless your parents told you that it's okay to feel like that, it's okay to feel like it's not fair, it's okay to feel jealous, it's okay, not that you're going to get it, but just to make space for that experience of what you're feeling. Like, you could hold space for it. It doesn't mean that you're going to get what you want, but just giving validation to the feeling. So when this child grows up and goes into the real world and they're not happy, they're stressed, they're fidgety, they're upset, it's Monday, they're starting school, and you normalize it. Most people are not happy to go back to school on a weekend. Most people are frustrated to go. I hear that. I hear that. I understand. I know, I can see what you're thinking. I know this is like noticed as like psychology verbiage, but in reality, sometimes when a person is going, if you just listen instead of getting into the role of justifying, explaining, labeling, a lot more healing gets done. Because when children are under the misconception that their right is to feel happy all the time, that their right is to get everything their way, that their right is that everything should be fair according to them. I call it the pretzel people. Pretzels break, pretzels, unlike a yarn, right? The yarn is mendable and you could make so much from one knot of a yarn. You could make yourself a blanket, a crochet, because it's mendable, it's flexible. But what are pretzels like? The minute you touch it, what happens? It breaks and it falls apart. Who misses out the most? The person themselves. So when you are brought up with such rigidity, such misery, such unhappiness because things don't go your way, guess who's the first person you're sabotaging? Yourself. And what happens? Not only that, the more stress you put your body under, your mind under, guess what? Who it's gonna attack? Your body. So we need to know that stresses are not just hypothetical, they're real, right? Like the opposite of like being content and in a good place, the stress creates cortisol. Cortisol is like the stress chemicals in our brain. In some ways it's good because it gives us that oomph to like get moving and stuff, but if you are keep releasing it when you don't need to, if you're constantly in the fight or flight mode and that constant survival and reactive mode, your body's engine is like going like all the time. So it's not in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is supposed to be calm, serene, and goodness. So a lot of people can develop anxiety disorders, stress disorder, medical. And one of the first places it hits people with, like, even with law Lenu cancers and stuff, is that the main things, with women, whether it's the breast or the cervical or the guts, a lot of it, if you think about it, has to do with what? The reproductive system. Think about it. You wonder why. And with men, it's like prostate cancer is one of the main. So men who are under a lot of stress. So you wonder why. Why would it affect there? And one time I heard a story which was so fascinating. It said elephants that are raised in circus, when they are pregnant and about to give birth, elephants, I think, are pregnant for 2 years. They're like one of those animals that are pregnant for a very long time. When that elephant knows that they're in the circus and they're going to continue to stay in the circus, you know what they do when they give birth? Do you know what they do? No. The mom and the dad crush the baby to death because they say to themselves, what's the point of you being alive in this world where there's no freedom? Imagine, they're animals, they're elephants, right? Because elephants are very like internalizing. And you know how in the cartoon of Bambi, you see them being tied to that little wood and they never move because they think since they were little they couldn't move. Now they can't move anymore either. They technically they could just lift up their leg and move, but they're so programmed that they think this is not worth living. So when your body is in the constant anxiety and stress mode, what's the first thing it's thinking of? What's what you're trying to do? Reproduce. Let's shut off the reproduction. Do you get it? Your brain is saying you are in such a hyper arousal stressful world. The first thing we don't want you to do is to bring more kids. What's this life to live? So imagine this mechanism of that thing in your head. It's sending messages to your brain that because they said, God forbid, lo aleinu, that like cancer cells are in the body. It's just about it getting activated, lo aleinu. It should be away from everyone. But then you wonder what activates it, what goes on. It's not a contagious thing, and part of it is the stress. Stress is the number one killer that affects people so badly. And when you live in a very stressful society, when you don't give yourself time to breathe, to be happy, what is happiness? Happiness is slowing down and enjoying the flowers. What's happiness? Slowing down. Like you came here today. You're like, this is so nice. I don't even imagine like being in LA. Look at these flowers. Even though the flowers are fake, doesn't matter. The colors and the experience automatically puts you in the zone of I'm in a good place. So that's the number one thing. This one of the things, and you see that fertility is on a high. Fertility issues are affecting more and more people at very, very young age. Women are going into menopause at young age. Men are going into situation where they're like, there's no sperm in their ejaculation. We've never had to this level. What's the change? We have better food, we have better technology. Yeah. But what are we missing? And what do we have a lot of? First, we have a lot of is stress. What are we missing? We're missing leisure. We're missing family time. We're missing community. We're missing enjoying that person to person time, which is the ikr, the essence of what humans need more than anything else. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't slow down to enjoy it, to breathe, to relax, your brain never learns to go into the parasympathetic nervous system. So your nervous system, like right behind your nose, you have a place. It's called the amygdala. The amygdala it's right behind your nose, like right behind your eyes. If you were like to take it exactly right behind there. So if this was your brain, right, it's right. Like if this was your front of your brain, this is called the amygdala. So the amygdala The amygdala is what the amygdala. Oh, so so the amygdala is what's in charge. The amygdala is what's in charge of the chemicals that get produced in your body. The amygdala is like the alarm, right? It either goes off because there's a danger, or it doesn't go off when there is safe. So what happens if you were brought up in a very tense situation, in a
Is that
stressful
only when
situation?
you get headaches it goes there?
No, it's behind it. It's behind
Oh,
your eyes. What helps is the smelling.
oh,
So when you feel like you're about to go into rage, you're about to get into anger, or when you think like someone is like about to pass out, what's the first thing they put? Something in front of their nose to smell it. Because when you have to smell, your frontal lobe has to get activated again. It brings you into the present. When you are under the mode of anxiety attack or rage or fear, you're functioning with your mammalian brain, which is your stressful, which is your protection, which is about to scream, yeah, leave me alone. I have survival mode, right? So what you want to do is to tell the body you're okay, nothing happened, you know. So what you do is when you immediately get them to smell, or you tell them what colors do you see around you, or you tell them to think something that's logically and has to do with the present. What it has to do is bring the logic part out, so it automatically covers your survival part of your brain mode, which is the amygdala. The amygdala is what fires to tell your body you're in danger. So what happens is when you are brought up and were born in a very stressful situation, guess what's firing all the time? Your amygdala is constantly in a nervous one. Are they after me? Are they going to do that? Am I this? Am I that? Because it's your body is constantly hyper aroused. And then if you already have anxiety and had anxiety in your family, that means your anxiety level is also up. So you're not able to slow down and just be in the moment. So what you want to train is to slow down and bring them into the moment instead of into the reactive mode. So the nose, from amongst the senses, one of the fastest way to get someone to be present is the sense of smell. And it's so interesting, and that happiness, the calming, when you and your sense of smell is the strongest. Not only the Torah talks about it, which is tells us that the techia hametim and behind there and the smell, but in the world of psychology, also it says the sense of smell is the strongest that never forgets. Meaning, if you were 6 months old or 1 years old and your mother wore a certain perfume at 6 months old, you could pass by your grandmother's house like at the age of 20, and suddenly you're like, I've been here before, but you're not really sure where. You can't remember details, but you remember the sensation because the sense of nose never forgets. Or many times you see when girls and guys date people, they meet another person and they're like, something felt right about them. And you're like wondering how. You don't even know anything about them. And you ask, and suddenly she's like, oh my God, he wears the same cologne as my ex from blah, blah, blah that gave me a good feeling. Do you get it? So your brain automatically makes that association of safety, calmness. But the opposite is true too. When you're frightened by something or you fear it, you automatically make a phobia and remove yourself from it. So whatever you have phobias of is like shackles that pull you down in life and prevent you from being happy because it's pulling you down. So part of the whole happiness journey is, instead of us blaming everyone else and making everyone else responsible and in charge of our happiness, is to slow down and say, wait a minute, what just happened here? What just bothered me? What just stressed me out? What can I do about it? What is it that this person brought up for me? I always tell people that the emotional distress that you're experiencing right now that bothered you most probably has a history. Unless you never felt unimportant, unloved, uncared for, you won't have a file for it. So if this person does a behavior that you feel unloved, there was a time in your life when you were a child that you felt unloved, or else you would have no file for it to know what that feels like. Does that make sense?
that's crazy. Yeah.
So in order for me to feel dumb, or like to say that she made me feel dumb, he made me feel worthless, she made me feel unimportant. She go, "What happened? Huh? Oh, that she made me feel dumb. She made me feel unimportant. There must have been a time in your life during your childhood where you felt that, and now this new experience is bringing back that history. But what we do is we waste our time trying to fix this person, fix that person, fix the dad, fix the mom, fix the brother, fix the sister, fix the husband, but you're not going to get anywhere. The most important factor is that you get to a place within yourself to know that your self love, self worth, self value has to come from where?
Ourselves.
From ourselves. Because if we're constantly depending on other people to give that to us, we go back to that. So that means that we're giving the key of our happiness into their hands, that they are always going to be responsible for my happiness. And that's why I always say, when children are taught that you're gonna, once you get married or once you go to school or you're setting up these kids for failure. How do you know what their future holds? How do you know who's supposed to get married, who's supposed to have kids, who's supposed to? The best thing to do is to tell kids that I want you to utilize the talents you have to its fullest potential. I want you to utilize the talents and the gifts that God gave you to the fullest potential. And I know there is a mission for you in this world. That's why God sent you here. And when they say, what's my mission? Well, we got to see what you're good at. I said in my other talk once that growing up, my family, till this day, and some friends always tell me I talk too much. When I was born, I actually didn't talk very fast. So they were like very worried. But then in Iran, they would give you tohme kaftar. Like there was like, this is supposed to. I told my mom, little did you know it's going to do this to me, right? But I always thought it's a gift. I said, if other people can't see it, that's their, that it comes to me. My grandmother always encouraged me that it's nice that I talk. And I got invited somewhere that they gave me a payment to do a speech. And I said, that is the talent. It doesn't mean that if other people annoy you by it, that it's not your talent. It could be that other people just don't have the tolerance for it, don't have the space for it, but it doesn't mean that it's not a talent. So I'm saying one of the things you could tell yourself, your family, your kids is that things that come to you naturally is usually parts of your talent. These could be very interesting things. Some kids are more detailed. Some kids have more patience. Some kids are more artistic. Some kids are like me, are talkative. I was talkative, but I wasn't really good at school. The academic part of it was always very hard for me. The test taking was hard for me, but explaining was easy for me. So when parents zoom in to what the kid is not doing right and forgetting what the kid is doing right, guess what? The kid is going to grow up. What do you think pulls you more down, the criticalness or the compliments? What do you think is heavier on our body? What do you think we carry more with us? How many people do you think remember people that complimented them during childhood, and how many people do you think remember people who criticized them? Which one do you think they remember more? The criticism, right? Think about it. How much salt does it take for you to feel like it was really salty? And how much sugar can you stand on your mouth? How much salt? Right? Even two pinch of a salt makes you feel like it's salty. But sugar, so it's an interesting concept that I was thinking when we were driving here. I said, when people compliment us, many times we justify it, right? And they say your scarf looks so beautiful. I'll say, oh, it's nothing. My friend gave it to me. Or your dress is so beautiful. Ah, really, not really. But when they say, why you talk so fast? Then I'm like, she's right. I talk fast. The criticism we take in like it's Emmett, like it's truth, right? But when people compliment us, what do we do with it? What do we do?
Brush.
We brush it off. Even that moment of true happiness we could experience, we think, oh, I'm not worth it. They're making it up. They're lying. They don't really mean it, right? Which is a problem. When I get into a good place within myself and I know that my vessel, my sense of self is valuable, is worthy, and important enough, then I will allow the compliments to come in, not in a haughty way, in a gratitude way that I'm glad, like my talking, I believe it's a gift from God. It's a gift that God gave me, and I'm happy that I could use that talent. So that's part of understanding the difference between what criticism does, and it's all a choice that we make. So another thing I was Bart Buggett was saying that how the neural path in our brain is the brain is very has neuroplasticity. that means it could constantly be changed, right? It doesn't matter how many years you were treated how. The more you make an effort to change it, you can change it. You have the ability to change how your brain works, even when it comes to habits, phobias, and our reaction. And phobias, one thing you should know is that you're not born with any fear. Any fear you have right now, you learned it. There are three ways. You either learned it, or someone told you a story about it, right? Or you saw it happen to someone. You're not born with, nobody just becomes like
Scared of
born,
dogs.
yeah, just comes into this world hating dogs, hating this, hating that, being afraid. They were something that made them fear. It's a very powerful lesson. So he was saying that just like phobias are learned, so is the good things. We could relearn our brain in a positive format. So he said one of the best ways to do this is guided meditation. He said you could trick your brain to fantasize about what you want, and eventually it will get what it wants. So he said if every day for 6 minutes, or what you could do is even speak it to yourself. Say, I can see myself getting invited to these huge talks and making so much money, and then I'm going to own my own Jewish Ladies Center, and I'm going to be able to do programs and activity, and I'm going to like be the director of it. That you keep reliving it. First of all, you increase dopamine and serotonin for yourself because it's all a positive experience. And second, you're allowing your mind to make that into a reality. um, and then he said to ask yourself every morning a positive question, like how great is it going to be today, or what is beautiful about my day today. So he was saying to ask yourself positive questions that you're going to give yourself a positive answer. And he said physical movement also affects our mindset. And he said making the motion like writing on a piece of paper, the number 8, which I thought is so interesting. It's like a kabbalistic number. Apparently it does some kind of rewiring between your right and your left
Really?
hemisphere.
So
the,
just
the number 8, like over and over, right? Now number 8 over and over on a piece of paper. He said it does some kind of a circulation between your two hemisphere, which gets you to become happier. And even like he said something about changing your signature kind of like affects it. So the writing, he said, rewires your brain. um, and also another thing that he was saying is that happiness is a form of expectation. That the expectation of the reality, the reason we are unhappy is the expectation we have that's above reality. That's what leads us to not being happy, because we have these expectations that's above reality for ourselves. So we keep pulling ourselves down and we feel stressful because we don't know why it didn't happen. And the preconceived notion that this should happen and then that should happen. And when things don't go our way, we fall apart. um, Prioritizing. He said prioritizing also makes a difference for us to know like where we're holding, also affects us very, very much. Um, and then I wanted to go over. So I wanted to share these two. Um, I could give like send it to you guys after. So I was thinking that some of the things that we think is just comes on people have, it's not true. Even with happiness, you have to have had a space for it or have to give it to yourself in order for you to have it. So I said, in order for a person to have compassion, they have to have been in a space where their family was able to hold a space for all their feelings. So, in order for me to have the attribute of compassion, I had to have been in a place where all my feelings were held, that it was okay for me to feel out about, that my parents were able to hold my sadness, frustration, and anger. But now that I know if they weren't, how can I provide that for myself? Does that make sense? So I'm saying the attribute of compassion, you don't just have it. You have to have had a compassion parents to hold all your feelings so that you could do that for yourself. So if you haven't had it, how could you work on it now? Consideration, patience with your feelings. So I said in order for you to have the attribute of consideration, you had to have people that were patient when you were going through different feelings. And if you didn't have it, how can you provide that for yourself to be more connection? Take time to connect to you, true connection. Look into your eyes, ask you about your day, ask you how you're doing, And if you didn't have that, how can you provide that for yourself now so that you can also provide it for other people in your life? So connection comes from experiencing it. And I mean true connection. Like, people even get uncomfortable when they look at themselves in the mirror. So it's like kind of like slowing down and saying, how's it going? How are you doing today? Just with as awkward and weird as it might sound. But that is going to get us into the habit of being more at peace and happy with ourselves. Just doing a check-in instead of like ruminating for all of our fears, frustration, because the opposite of happy is also anxiety, anxious, nervousness. So it's like relocating ourselves and bringing us back. Empathy, I compared that with undivided attention. I made these up. I didn't like, well, it didn't come from like any books. So in order for you to have empathy, like you have to be in a space where there was undivided attention, where you felt like you were getting that empathetic understanding. Common sense, taking care of your needs right away. So I compared common sense. You know how you think to yourself, it's common sense. If I'm walking behind you, hold the door for me. It's common sense. If we're out to a restaurant and there's four egg roll and you already had two and I didn't have any, to what? Leave it for me. Like we think it's common sense, right? But then now imagine if this child during their baby life and stuff, their most important needs were never met. You think they're going to care about the needs of others?
Isn't that consideration?
Say that
It's not consideration.
it I guess it could be both, but I'm saying like we think of it as common sense that the baby's diaper is wet, you change it, you don't wait an hour, right? So I'm saying it's more on the, like, the baby is hungry, the first thing you should do is go feed your baby before washing the dishes, right? But what happens if those child's basic common sense needs were not met? So that child grows up not having as developed common sense because that was not applied to their lifetime. Like if I'm in a wet diaper and I'm crying, right, and you need to go wash the dishes, common sense would say change my diaper, the baby's diaper first, because the baby can't do anything for themselves. So that's the way I'm relating to common sense. Present is that when, like when you are able to fully be present with others, I think has to do with if you during your infancy were like the center of attention, being able to like get that attention that you needed. And if you didn't get it, how can you create that space in a healthy way for yourself now? Smile and joy, like hope and joy, comes from being in an environment where there was like happiness and joy. And true love comes from feeling loved without any demands, like being in a space where you were loved for the genuineness of who you are. So ultimately, I feel like happiness is that space that I have to check in with myself and remind myself how to tune in. And true sense of happiness has nothing to do with if you're married or not, if you have kids or not, if you drive the best car or not. A lot of it has to do with contentment. How can I get to a place of recognizing what I do have and changing my mindset? By changing my mindset, and the shift will will help my brain to produce more dopamine, more serotonin, which all has to do with the good chemicals, and create a happier space for myself. Because when in my body I have more oxytocin and dopamine, and endorphin comes from like walking and exercising, my body will be in a more calmer state. And meditation is also very good to just like slow down and meditate. So instead of excessively producing cortisol, which is the stress hormone, I make that shift and I tell myself, hold on a second. Or if I know a negative thought is coming, I tell myself, oh, I'm starting to think that thought again, let me change my pathway, right? You acknowledge it, you notice it, because we keep ruminating over things that went wrong for us. We keep talking about it. It's like an obsession. But if it's not helpful to me, I need to create a pathway that's more productive and useful to my life. Thank you so much for listening. This is Natalie Zangon, our talk on happiness.